The stars above New York City glittered with a cold indifference. The pulse of the city was alive, chaotic, and relentless, but to Mia, standing alone on the rooftop of a high-rise, it all felt distant. The world seemed vast, and her place in it seemed increasingly insignificant. She ran her fingers through her short, brown hair, the wind tugging at the strands as if trying to pull her away from the dark thoughts crowding her mind. She had reached a point in her life where the expectations, the carefully constructed persona she had built, no longer felt like a safe shield. All the ambition, the calculated moves, felt empty now. Below, the city hummed with life, oblivious to her inner turmoil. She was 29, an up-and-coming executive at a prestigious marketing firm, known for her brilliance and poise. But the truth was, Mia was tired. Tired of playing the game, tired of fitting into a world that never seemed to see her for who she truly was. She wanted more. But what was that, more? The answer always eluded her, like a shadow fading just before she could grasp it. A sound behind her broke her reverie. She turned sharply, surprised, as if she hadn't heard the footsteps on the rooftop. There, emerging from the shadows, was him. Adrian. The man who had been part of her life for longer than she cared to admit. They hadn't spoken in months, not since that final, unsaid goodbye. But there he was, standing tall, his dark eyes piercing through the dim light, looking as though he belonged in the shadows themselves. "You shouldn't be here," Mia said softly, though the words didn't carry the weight of an order. They were more like a plea. A part of her wanted him to leave, yet another part, a stronger part, wanted to hear him say something, anything, to break the silence that had stretched between them like a canyon too wide to cross. Adrian studied her for a long moment, his gaze sharp, unreadable. His jaw clenched before he spoke. "I was worried about you." Mia chuckled, a humorless sound. "Worried about me? Since when? Last I checked, you were the one who walked away." Adrian's face tightened, the expression fleeting, as if her words had landed a blow. But he didn't back down. Instead, he took a step closer, the sharp scent of his cologne mingling with the fresh night air. "I didn't walk away, Mia. I had to give you space. You were suffocating yourself." Mia swallowed hard. Those words, they hit deeper than she was willing to admit. Adrian always knew exactly what to say, what to press, to make her feel something real when she'd rather stay numb. But she couldn't let herself go down that path again. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. "You don't know me," Mia replied, though her voice lacked conviction. She had always believed that line, that she was an island, self-sufficient and independent. But deep down, something in her trembled at the truth of Adrian's words. He always saw her, in ways no one else ever had. Adrian stepped forward again, closer now, until there was barely an inch between them. The intensity between them was palpable, an electric charge that neither of them could ignore. His hand reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and in that brief touch, all the memories came flooding back, the late-night talks, the shared dreams, the quiet, tender moments when nothing else mattered but the connection they had. "I see you, Mia," he said softly, his voice low and steady. "I see all of you. Not just the mask you wear for everyone else. The real you." Her breath caught in her throat. There was no turning back now. Her walls, the ones she had worked so hard to build, started to crumble, piece by piece. The vulnerability she had spent years hiding began to show, and for the first time in a long while, she felt exposed. "Why now, Adrian?" Mia asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Why after all this time? After everything we've been through?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her face, as if searching for something he had lost, something only she could provide. His fingers lingered near her cheek, a quiet acknowledgement of the distance between them, both physical and emotional. "I never stopped caring about you," he said finally, the words coming out more raw than she expected. "And I didn't walk away because I didn't care. I walked away because I didn't know how to help you. But I see it now, Mia. You're not as invincible as you pretend to be. You don't have to do it all on your own." Mia shook her head, disoriented by the weight of his confession. You don't get it, Adrian. I've worked my whole life to prove that I'm enough. To prove that I don't need anyone. But I'm losing myself in the process. The words felt like a confession, a raw admission of the emptiness she had been hiding beneath her composed exterior. She had built her entire identity around the idea of being strong, of never needing anyone. But now, standing here with him, she realized that she didn't want to be alone anymore. Not like this. Adrian's hand brushed hers, gentle but firm. You're not alone. Not anymore. The tension between them shifted, not entirely gone but now more palpable than ever. They stood in silence for a few moments, the sound of their breathing mingling with the distant hum of the city below. Mia's heart raced as she felt the walls she had built around herself begin to crack. And then it happened. The world seemed to stop. Time hung in the balance, suspended by the pull between them, the unspoken desire that neither could ignore any longer. Adrian leaned forward, his lips brushing against hers, tentative at first, as if unsure of her reaction. But Mia didn't pull away. Instead, she closed her eyes, giving in to the moment, to the connection that had never truly left. When they finally parted breathless, Adrian's eyes softened, his expression full of something Mia couldn't quite place. Hope, regret, or maybe both. I'm not going anywhere, Mia, he whispered, the words threading through the quiet night. But as the kiss lingered in her mind, so did the uncertainty. She had spent so long running, hiding from what she truly wanted. Now, standing on the precipice of something new, she couldn't help but wonder, was she ready to let go of the past? To embrace something real, something messy and raw, even if it meant giving up control? The rooftops seemed to echo her questions, and the city, for the first time in a long while, felt alive with possibility. But Mia knew one thing for certain: Adrian was here, and he wasn't going to let her walk away again. The real question was, would she let him stay? Mia woke to the sound of rain drumming against her apartment window. The city had transformed overnight, from the usual stifling humidity to a chilling downpour, its relentless percussion a reminder of the storm inside her. She ran her fingers through her disheveled hair and stared at the empty side of the bed. The weight of the previous night's events settled around her like a fog. Adrian had kissed her. And it wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was charged, raw, and undeniable. The kiss was not just a resolution of years of tension, it was a challenge. The challenge of stepping into a space that had once been a safe distance from everything that had hurt her. The rain outside was relentless, like the pounding of her heart in her chest. As much as she wanted to convince herself that everything was fine, that it was just a momentary lapse, she knew better. That moment, that kiss, had opened a door she hadn't realized she'd kept shut for so long. She sighed, pushing herself out of bed, the cold tile beneath her feet grounding her in reality. Adrian's face loomed in her thoughts, his presence still lingering in the apartment, his words resonating with a tenderness she hadn't expected. I'm not going anywhere, Mia. But that's what she was afraid of. Mia had always built walls. Not out of malice, but out of survival. After years of building a career and a reputation, she didn't have room for vulnerability. And Adrian, he was a symbol of everything she tried to bury. He knew her. Not just the polished, professional version she presented to the world, but the real, broken version that she never wanted anyone to see. And yet there he was, shattering her defenses with each word, each touch. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the bitterness of the dark liquid matching the turmoil swirling inside her. But as the steam rose from her mug, so did the question that refused to leave her: what now? A knock at the door startled her, the sound echoing through the apartment like a reminder of her unspoken anxieties. She set the cup down, the warm ceramic a brief comfort before she crossed the floor and opened the door. Standing there, in the hallway, drenched from the rain, was Adrian. His dark hair clung to his forehead, his eyes searching hers as if trying to read the storm behind her gaze. We need to talk. Mia stood frozen for a moment, torn between pushing him away and allowing him in. She hadn't expected him to come back, not this soon. But the sincerity in his eyes was undeniable. I wasn't sure you'd come back. she said, her voice more fragile than she intended. I wasn't sure you'd want me to. Adrian replied quietly, taking a step forward. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't step back. Instead, she stepped aside, opening the door wider to let him in. As he crossed the threshold, the room seemed to shrink, their shared history hanging heavy in the air between them. Adrian removed his jacket, running a hand through his wet hair before meeting her eyes. I'm not here to complicate things, Mia. But I can't pretend like I didn't feel what we both felt last night. Mia crossed her arms, her gaze not meeting his. What exactly is it you think we felt? He took a deep breath, his expression softening. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. We've danced around this for years. But last night, that kiss? It wasn't just a kiss, Mia. It was everything we've both been avoiding. And I don't think we can go back to pretending it doesn't matter. She paced a few steps, trying to organize the chaos in her mind. Pretend it doesn't matter. How could it not matter? Adrian wasn't just anyone. He was the man who had once been a part of her life in ways no one else ever had. And yet, she had pushed him away. She had convinced herself that being independent, being self-sufficient, was enough. But it wasn't. You left, Adrian, Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. You left when I needed you most. Adrian flinched as if her words had cut deeper than he expected. But he didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped closer. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I didn't know how to fix what we had. You were spiraling, Mia. You were suffocating under all that pressure you put on yourself. Mia closed her eyes, her throat tightening. He was right. She had been suffocating. The weight of her career, the expectations, the constant need to be perfect, it had been crushing her from the inside out. And Adrian, in his own way, had seen it. He'd recognized the cracks before she had. Then why come back now? She asked, her voice trembling. He reached out, taking her hand gently, his touch warm against her cold skin. Because I don't want to see you lose yourself. Not when I know what's waiting for you beyond all of this. Mia, you're stronger than you think. But you don't have to do it alone. The sincerity in his voice hit her harder than any of his previous words. It was raw, real, and unguarded. For the first time, Mia didn't feel like she had to carry everything on her own. Adrian was here, and for some reason, he believed in her more than she believed in herself. I don't know if I can let you in again, Adrian, Mia confessed, her voice shaky. I don't know if I can let myself believe that it's okay to need someone. Adrian's thumb brushed the back of her hand, his grip steady. I'm not asking you to believe that right now. All I'm asking is for a chance to show you that you don't have to fight this battle alone. I'm here, Mia. And I'm not going anywhere. For a long moment, the words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Mia's heart raced, her emotions a storm she couldn't quite control. Part of her wanted to push him away again, to retreat back into the fortress she had built around her. But another part, the part that had been starved for connection, wanted to let go and trust him. And as the rain outside grew heavier, so did the weight of the decision she had to make. I'm scared, Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. Adrian nodded, his gaze never wavering. So am I. But it wasn't just the fear of the unknown that held them together now. It was the truth that neither could ignore. They were tethered by something deeper than either of them had realized. And as the storm raged outside, the storm between them was just beginning. The door closed behind them with a soft thud, leaving them alone together in the silence that spoke louder than words ever could. The city was quiet for once. The rain had stopped, but the streets glistened as the remnants of the storm lingered like a memory. The air was thick with the scent of wet asphalt and fresh earth, a rare moment of stillness in New York. Mia leaned against the windowsill of her apartment, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the condensation forming on the glass. Her gaze was fixed on the world outside, but her mind was elsewhere, on Adrian. The night before had left her spinning. The weight of their shared kiss lingered, a tactile memory that she couldn't escape. Adrian had left a part of himself with her, and now, she wasn't sure if she could ever untangle it. Their history, so complicated and fraught, was unraveling piece by piece. But in all the years they had spent apart, in all the walls she had carefully built, Mia couldn't shake the undeniable truth: something had shifted. He had come back. He had come back for her. Mia had spent years convincing herself she didn't need anyone. She built her career on the notion of self-sufficiency, of not relying on anyone to complete her. But Adrian had always seen through that. He had always been the one person who could see the cracks in her armor, and despite everything, he had returned, offering a lifeline she wasn't sure she was ready to take. A soft knock on her door broke her thoughts. She didn't need to check who it was. She could feel him, his presence, his warmth, before she even opened the door. "Morning," Adrian said with a small smile as she let him in, his eyes dark but filled with a tenderness she hadn't expected. Mia nodded but didn't say anything. She stepped aside, letting him in, though her heart beat a little faster in her chest. She couldn't ignore the pull between them, the magnetic connection that seemed to grow stronger every time they were near each other. It wasn't just physical, it was deeper than that. It was the unspoken understanding that bound them together, the history that neither of them could erase. "Can we talk?" Adrian asked, his voice softer than before, less commanding, more uncertain. Mia nodded again, but this time, she stepped back toward the couch, motioning for him to sit. She took a deep breath before speaking, her words laced with caution. "What do you want, Adrian? Why are you really here?" He hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable flashing in his eyes before he sat beside her. The space between them was still palpable, but there was a new tension now, a kind of rawness that neither of them could ignore. "I came back for you," Adrian said simply, his voice steady despite the vulnerability that laced the words. Mia's throat tightened. She was used to hearing declarations of affection, used to people who wanted things from her: attention, approval, respect. But this was different. Adrian wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't demanding anything in return. He was simply offering himself, unguarded and raw, in a way she hadn't expected. "Why now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why after all this time?" "Because I couldn't stand seeing you disappear behind all the walls you've built," Adrian said, his gaze fixed on her, intense yet soft. "I know you, Mia. I know the real you. And I'm not leaving until you let me in." Mia blinked, taken aback by the depth of his words. She wanted to shut him out, to push him away, but something about his sincerity kept her rooted to the spot. She had spent years shutting everyone out, first her family, then her friends, then Adrian. She had convinced herself that she was fine on her own, that she didn't need anyone's help, anyone's love. But now, sitting in the quiet of her apartment, with Adrian beside her, she realized that she had been lying to herself all along. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy with unspoken emotions. Mia's fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve as she tried to find the right words. But there was nothing. The truth was that she didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to explain how afraid she was. Afraid of being vulnerable, of being hurt, of losing herself in someone else. "Adrian, she began, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't know how to finish the sentence. She wanted to tell him how conflicted she felt, how scared she was of opening up, of giving in. But somehow, the words didn't come. "I know," Adrian said, his voice understanding. "You don't have to say anything. But I'm not going anywhere. And I'm not asking you to change overnight. I just want to be here. For you." Mia swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. His words were both a comfort and a challenge. They offered her safety, but they also demanded something from her, something she wasn't sure she could give. "You don't understand," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I've spent my whole life trying to prove I don't need anyone. I can't just let go. I can't just let you in. I understand more than you think," Adrian replied, his voice low but firm. "You're not alone, Mia. You never have been." Mia's eyes burned with the weight of his words. Her throat felt tight, the rush of emotion too much to process all at once. She didn't know what to do with all of this. The overwhelming sensation of being seen, of being wanted. It was as if everything she had built was crumbling, and for the first time, she wasn't sure if that was a bad thing. "Maybe I don't know what to do with this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "With you." Adrian reached for her hand, his fingers warm against her cold skin. He didn't force her to respond, didn't pressure her to open up. He simply let his presence be a reassurance that, for once, it was okay to let go. And then, as if in answer to the unspoken questions between them, the doorbell rang. Mia froze. It wasn't a knock, this was a deliberate, insistent ring. Her heart skipped a beat, her pulse quickening with a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread. Adrian's eyes narrowed as he stood, his body tense. "Do you know who that is?" Mia shook her head, her throat dry. The world outside had never felt so close, so intrusive. Who could it be? And why did she feel like everything was about to change? The doorbell rang again, louder this time, cutting through the charged silence in the room. Mia's heart stuttered in her chest as her gaze flicked to Adrian. His brow furrowed, his eyes narrowing with concern. "Stay here," he muttered, stepping toward the door with purposeful steps, his frame blocking the entrance. Mia's breath hitched as her mind raced, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Who could it be? And why did she feel as if everything she'd been trying to avoid was closing in? The ring echoed once more through the apartment, unnervingly persistent. Adrian paused, his hand hovering over the doorknob. Without a word, he glanced over his shoulder at Mia. The look in his eyes was both cautionary and urgent. He was prepared for something he wasn't sharing with her. Mia's stomach twisted, her mind a swirl of possibilities. She had never been good at handling the unknown, never been one to embrace the messiness of life. But this felt different. This felt like a moment of reckoning, a moment where her carefully constructed life might unravel in front of her. "I'll be fine," Adrian said, though his voice was lower now, as if he were trying to convince himself as much as her. "Just wait for me." With that, he opened the door. Mia's pulse quickened as she strained to listen, her breath held, trying to discern the conversation outside. She couldn't make out the words, but the tension in the voices was unmistakable. She wanted to push herself forward, to see what was happening, but something in her kept her frozen. The minutes stretched, each second thick with uncertainty. The faint murmurs outside grew louder until the door clicked shut. Adrian stood in the doorway, his face a mask of careful composure, but the storm in his eyes betrayed him. "They're here," he said, his voice edged with something Mia couldn't quite place. "They found us." Mia's stomach clenched at the implication. "Who found them?" She stood up, the floor cold beneath her feet. "What do you mean? Who found us?" Adrian moved away from the door and back toward her, his jaw clenched. "It's not just about us anymore, Mia. There are forces involved here that—" He cut himself off, his frustration evident. "I should have told you sooner. But I thought I could keep you safe from this." "Safe from what?" Mia's voice rose, the sharp edge of panic creeping into her tone. Her eyes searched his, demanding answers. "What are you talking about, Adrian?" He ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn, but his eyes softened when he met her gaze. "I didn't come back for just any reason, Mia. I came back because there's something bigger happening. Something dangerous." Mia's mind raced. "Dangerous? What could be dangerous about us?" Adrian stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. The tension in the room was palpable, a flickering pulse of fear, hope, and uncertainty. He looked at her with a mixture of regret and urgency, and for the first time, Mia saw the full weight of his words. The man standing before her wasn't just the man she had loved, the man she had pushed away. He was someone different now, someone changed by circumstances beyond her comprehension. "There are things I didn't want you to know," Adrian began, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "Things about my past, about who I am. About what I've been doing, and why I left." Mia's chest tightened. The revelation in his words was like a heavy hand on her heart, pressing down, suffocating. Adrian, she whispered, the name a plea, a quiet acknowledgement of the distance between them. I'm not the man you think I am, he confessed, his gaze unwavering. I'm not just someone who came back because I miss you. I came back because I made a promise to someone. To protect you, Mia. Her mind reeled, the pieces not yet fitting together. Protect me? From what? He hesitated, his eyes dark with the gravity of his words. From people who want to use you. From a world you don't know exists. Mia took a step back, her breath catching in her throat. A world I don't know exists? What the hell are you talking about, Adrian? You're not just anyone, Mia, he said, his words deliberate, heavy with meaning. You're connected to something that goes far beyond you and me. Something bigger, something dangerous. And they won't stop until they get what they want. Mia's mind raced, her pulse thundering in her ears. She shook her head in disbelief. No. This isn't real. You're scaring me. Adrian reached out to her, his hand gripping her arm gently but firmly. Listen to me, Mia. I didn't want you to know any of this. I didn't want you to be dragged into this world. But you're already a part of it. They know about you. And they'll stop at nothing to get to you. Who are they? Mia demanded, her voice trembling. She couldn't keep up anymore. The world she knew, the world she had carefully controlled, was slipping away. The very foundation beneath her was cracking. Adrian stepped back, rubbing his face in frustration. He was on the verge of something, but he couldn't bring himself to say the words. The truth was too dangerous, too much for her to handle in one breath. But he couldn't lie to her anymore. They're not just people, Mia, he said quietly. They're part of something, otherworldly. And they've been watching you for a long time. The words hit her like a slap to the face, and for a moment Mia couldn't breathe. Otherworldly? Watching her? Her mind spun. What was he talking about? What did this mean for them? For her? Why me? She whispered, her voice hoarse. Adrian met her gaze, his expression filled with a sorrow she couldn't read. Because of who you are. And because of what's coming. We don't have much time, Mia. The room felt smaller, suffocating, and Mia realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Not now, not after the revelation Adrian had just dropped. She was no longer just a woman trying to navigate life. She was a pawn in a much larger game, and Adrian was the only one who could protect her from whatever lay ahead. And as the silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of his words, Mia knew that the choice she made in the next few moments would alter everything. The doorbell rang again, louder this time, as if to punctuate the urgency of their situation.